Hariam Om Vishnu Namah Om Buddhaya Namah Om Devaya Namah. So the chapter 11 on Buddha's teachings, I am reciting it for your further reference, which will help you to concentrate on the essence of the thoughts and preachings given by Buddha for manifestation of the ultimate goal of your salvation. Chapter 11 tells about the Buddha's royal patrons. Treacherous bog is it, this patronage of bows and gifts and treat from wealthy folk. 'Tis like a fine dart bedded in the flesh for erring human heart to extricate. Written by Mahakashyapa Thera Gatha 1053. King Bimbisara. King Bimbisara, who ruled in Magad with its capital at Rajgaha, was the Buddha's first royal patron. Ascending the throne at the age of 15, he reigned for 52 years. When Prince Siddhartha renounced the world and was seeking alms in the streets of Rajgaha as a humble ascetic, the king saw him from his palace and was highly impressed by his majestic appearance and dignified deportment. Immediately he sent messengers to ascertain who he was. On learning that he was resting after his meal under the Pandava Bhatta, the king, accompanied by his retinue, went up to the royal ascetics and inquired about his birthplace and ancestry. The ascetic Gautama replied, just straight, O king, upon the Himalaya, there is in the district of Kosla of ancient families a country endowed with wealth and energy. I am sprung from that family, which by clan belongs to the solar dynasty, by birth to the Shakyas. I crave not for pleasures of the senses, realizing that evil of sensual pleasures and seeing renunciation as safe. I proceeded to seek the highest, for in that my mind rejoices. Thereupon the king invited him to visit his kingdom after his enlightenment, as referred by Sutta Nipata, Pavajja Sutta. The Buddha meets King Bimbisara. In accordance with the promise the Buddha made to King Bimbisara before his enlightenment, he, with his large retinue to 100 disciples, went from Gaya to Rajgriha, the capital of the district of Magad. Here he stayed at the Supatinatha shrine in a palm grove. This happy news of the Buddha's arrival in the kingdom and his high reputation as an unparalleled religious teacher soon spread in the city. The king, hearing of his arrival, came with a large number of his subjects to welcome the Buddha. He approached the Buddha, respectfully saluted him, and sat at the side. Of his subjects, some respectfully saluted him, some looked toward him with expression of friendly greetings, some saluted him with clasped hands, some introduced themselves, while others in perfect silence took their seats. As both the Buddha Gautam and the Venerable Kashyapa were held in high esteem by the multitude, they were not certain whether the Buddha was leading the holy life under Venerable Kashyapa or the latter under the former. The Buddha read their thoughts and questioned Venerable Kashyapa as to why he had given up his fire sacrifice. Understanding the motive of the Buddha's question, he explained that he abandoned fire sacrifice because he preferred the passionless and peaceful state of Nibbana to worthless sensual pleasures. After this, he fell at the feet of the Buddha and, acknowledging his superiority, said, My teacher, Lord is the exalted one. I am the disciple. My teacher, Lord is the exalted one. I am the disciple. The devout people were delighted to hear of the conversation. The Buddha thereupon praised the Mahanarada Kashyapa Jataka to show how, in a previous birth, when he was born as Narad, still subject to passion, he converted Kashyapa in a similar way. See chapter 7 for details. Hearing the Dhamma expounded by the Buddha, the eye of truth arose in them all. King Bimbisara attained Shotapatti and seeking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, invited the Buddha and his disciples to his place for the meal of the following day. After the meal, the king wished to know where the Buddha would reside. The Buddha replied that a secure place, neither too far nor too close to the city, accessible to those who desire to visit him, pleasant, not crowded during the day, not too noisy at night, with as few sounds as possible, airy, and fit for the privacy of men would be suitable. The king thought that his bamboo grove would meet all such requirements. Therefore, in return for the transcendental gift the Buddha had bestowed upon him, he gifted for the use of the Buddha and the Sangha the park with this ideally secluded bamboo grove, also known as the sanctuary of the squirrels. It would appear that this park had no building for the use of bhikkhus but was filled with many shady trees and secluded spots. However, this was the first gift of a place of residence for the Buddha and his disciples. The Buddha has spent three successive rainy seasons and three other rainy seasons in this quiet valley Vanaranma. After his conversion, the king led the life of an exemplary monarch, observing Uposatha regularly on 6 days of the month. Number 544 are the references. See page 105, note 1. The Pali Arma means a mere park. There were no buildings where the Buddha accepted this generous gift. At present, the term Arma is used in the sense of a monastery with necessary buildings for monks. Kaushala Devi, daughter of King Mahakoshal and sister of King Pesanadi Koshala, was his chief loyal queen. Ajatashatru was her son. Khema, who, thought, who through the ingenuity of the king became a follower of the Buddha, and who later rose to the position of the first female disciple of the order of nuns, was another queen. Though he was a pious monarch, yet due to his past evil karma, he had a very sad and pathetic end. Prince Ajatasattu, successor to the throne, instigated by wicked Devadatta Thera, attempted to kill him and usurp the throne. The unfortunate prince was caught red handed, and the compassionate father, instead of punishing him for his spiritual act, rewarded him with the coveted crown. The ungrateful son showed his gratitude to his father by casting him into the prison in order to starve him to death. His mother alone had free access to the king daily. The loyal queen carried food concealed in her waist pouch. To this the prince objected. Then she carried food concealed in her hair knot. The prince resented this too. Later she bathed herself in scented water and besmeared her body with a mixture of honey, butter, ghee, and molasses. The king licked her body and sustained himself. The over vigilant prince detected this and ordered his mother not to visit his father. King Bimbisara was without any means of subsistence, but he paced up and down enjoying spiritual happiness as he was a Shotapanna. Ultimately, the wicked son decided to put an end to the life of his noble father. Ruthlessly, he ordered his barber to cut upon his shoals and put salt and oil thereon and make him walk on burning charcoals. The king, who saw the barber approaching thought that the son, realizing his folly, was sending the barber to shave his grooved beard and hair and release him from prison. Contrary to his expectations, he had to meet an ultimately saddened, untimely saddened. The barber mercilessly executed the inhuman orders of the barbarous prince. The good king died in great agony. On that very day, a son was born unto Ajatashatru. Letters conveying the news of birth and death reached the palace at the same time. The letter conveying the happy news was first read. Lo, the love he cherished towards his firstborn son was indescribable. His body was thrilled with joy, and the paternal love penetrated up to the very marrow of his bones. Immediately, he rushed to his beloved mother and questioned, Mother dear, did my father love me when I was a child? What say you, son? When you were conceived in my womb, I developed a craving to sip some blood from the right hand of your father. This I dare not say. Consequently, I grew pale and thin. I was finally persuaded to disclose my inhuman desire. Joyfully, your father fulfilled my wish, and I drank the abhorrent potion. The soothsayers predicted that you would be an enemy of your father. Accordingly, you were named Ajatashatru, unborn enemy. I attempted to effect a miscarriage, but your father prevented it. After you were born, again I wanted to kill you. Again your father interfered. On one occasion, you were suffering from a boil in your finger, and nobody was able to lull you into sleep. But your father, who was administering justice in his loyal court, took you into his lap and, caressing you, shut the boil. Lo, inside the mouth it burst open. Oh, my dear son, that pus and blood. Yes, your affectionate father swallowed it, but of love for you, out of love for you. Instantly he cried, Run and release my beloved father quickly. His father had closed his eyes forever. The other letter was then placed in his hand. Ajatashatru shed hot tears. He realized what paternal love only was after he became a father himself. King Bimbisara died and was immediately after born as a deva named Janavasubha in the Katumharajika heaven. Later, Ajatashattu made the Buddha and became one of his distinguished lay followers and took a leading part in the holding of the first convocation. King Pasenadi Kosala. King Pasenadi Kosala, the son of King Mahakosala, who reigned in the kingdom of Kosal with its capital at Savatthi, was another royal patron of the Buddha. He was a contemporary to the Buddha, and owing to his proficiency in various arts, he had the good fortune to be made king by his father while he was alive. His conversation must probably have taken place during the very early part of the Buddha's ministry. In the Samutta Nikaya, it is stated that once he approached the Buddha and questioning him about his perfect enlightenment, referred to him as being young in years and young in ordination. Samyutta Nikaya 1.64, Kinder Sayings 1 page 94. The Buddha replied, there are four objects, O Maharaja, that should not be disregarded or despised. They are a Khatya, a warrior prince, snake, fire, and bhikkhu, mendicant monk. An enraged warrior prince thou young may ruthlessly cause harm to others. The bite of even a small snake may prove fatal. A little fire may produce a conflagration. Even a young monk may be a saint or a Dhamma scholar. Then he delivered an interesting sermon on this subject to the king. At the close of this ceremony, the king expressed his great pleasure and instantly became a follower of the Buddha. Since then, till his death, he was deeply attached to the Buddha. It is said that on one occasion the king prostrated himself before the Buddha and stroked his feet, covering them with kisses. His chief queen, Mallika, a very devout and wise lady, well versed in the Dhamma, was greatly responsible for his religious enthusiasm. Like a true friend, she had to act as his religious guide on several occasions. One day, the king dreamed 16 unusual dreams and was greatly perturbed in mind, not knowing their true significance. His Brahmin advisors interpreted them to be dreams portending evil and instructed him to make an elaborate animal sacrifice towards of the dangers resulting therefrom. As advised, he made all necessary arrangements for this inhuman sacrifice, which would have resulted in the loss of thousands of helpless creatures. Queen Mallika, hearing of this barbarous act about to be perpetrated, persuaded the king to get the dream interpreted by the Buddha, whose understanding infinitely surpassed that of those worldly Brahmins. The king approached the Buddha and mentioned the object of his visit, relating the 16 dreams. He wished to know the significance, and the Buddha explained their significance fully to him. Unlike King Bimbisara, King Kaushal had the good fortune to hear several edifying and instructive discourses from the Buddha. In the Samyutta Nikaya, there appears a special section called the Kaushal Samayutta, in which are recorded most of the discourses and talks given by the Buddha to the king. Majjhima Nikaya 2, number 120. See Mahasupina Jataka translation book 1 page 188 192 number 77. Samyutta Nikaya 68, Kindred Sayings, page 94. Once, while the king was seated in the company of the Buddha, he saw some ascetics with hairy bodies and long nails passing by, and rising from his seat respectfully saluted them, calling out his name to them. I am the king, your reverences, the Kausala, patiently. When they had gone, he came back to the Buddha and wished to know whether they were arhants or those who were striving for arhantship. The Buddha explained that it was difficult for ordinary laymen enjoying material pleasures to judge whether others are arhants or not, and made the following interesting observations. It is by association, samvasena, that one's conduct sila is to be understood, and that too after a long time and not in a short time, by one who is watchful and not by a heedless person, by an intelligent person and not by an unintelligent one. It's by converse, samvoharena, that one's purity, shotyam, is to be understood. It's in time of trouble that one's fortitude is to be understood. It's by discussion that one's wisdom is to be understood, and that too after a long time and not in a short time. By one who is watchful and not by a heedless person, by an intelligent person and not by an unintelligent one. Summing up the above, the Buddha uttered the following verses: not by his outward guise is man well known, and flitting glance let none place confidence. In grab of decent, well conducted fall, the unrestrained life in the world at large. As a clay, erring made to counterfeit, or bronze half penny coated over with gold, some fair at large hidden beneath disguise, without comely and fair, within impure. King Kaushal, as a ruler of a great kingdom, could not possibly have avoided warfare, especially with kings of neighboring countries. Once he was compelled to fight with his own nephew, King Ajatashattu, and was defeated. Hearing it, the Buddha remarked, victory breeds hatred. The defeated live in pain. Happily, the peaceful life, giving up victory and defeat. On another occasion, King Kosla was victorious and he confiscated the whole army of King Ajatashattu, saying only him. When the Buddha heard about this new victory, he uttered the following verses, the truth of which applied with equal force to this modern war weary world as well. A man may spoil another just so far as it may serve his ends, but when his is spoiled by others, it is spoils yet again, so long as Abel's fruit is not mature. The fool doth fancy knows the power, the chance, but when the deed bears fruit, he feareth it. The slayer gets a slayer in his turn. The conqueror gets one who conquers him. The abuser wins abuse. The annoyer fret. Thus, by the evolution of the deed, a man who spoils is spoiled in his turn. What the Buddha has said to King Kaushal about women is equally interesting and extremely encouraging to womankind. Once, while the king was engaged in a pious conversation with the Buddha, a messenger came and whispered into his ear that Queen Mallika had given birth to a daughter. Like Kindred Sayings Part 1, page 104 to 106, Kindred Sayings Part 1, page 109 1010, Dhammapada, volume 201, ABIT, page 1010. The king was not pleased at this unwelcome news. In ancient India, as it is to a great extent today, adultery is not considered a happy addiction to a family for several selfish reasons, as for instance, the problem of providing a dowry. The Buddha, unlike any other religious teacher, paid a glowing tribute to women and mentioned four chief characteristics that adorn a woman in the following words. Some women are indeed better than men. Bring her up, O Lord of men. There are women who are wise, virtuous, who regard mother in law as a goddess, and who are chaste. To such a noble wife may be born a valiant son, a lord of realms, who would rule a kingdom. Some women are even better than men. Ithibi Ichiyasaya were the actual words used by the Buddha. No religious teacher has made such a bold and noble utterance, especially in India, where women were not held in high esteem. Deeply grieved over the death of his old grandmother, aged 120 years, King Kausalya approached the Buddha and said that he would have given everything within his means to save his grandmother, who had been as a mother to him. The Buddha consoled him, saying, all beings are mortal. They end with death. They have death in prospect. All the vessels wrought by the potter, whether they are baked or unbaked, are breakable. They finish broken. They have case in prospect. Kinder Singh Part 1, page 111. Samayutta Nikaya Part 1, page 86. See Kinder Singh's Part 1, page 122. The king was so desirous of hearing the Dhamma that even if affairs of state demanded his presence in other parts of the kingdom, he would avail himself of every possible opportunity to visit the Buddha and engage in a pious conversation. The Dhamma Chaitya and Kannakathalla suttas were preached on such occasions. King Kausal's chief consort, the daughter of Rugal and maker Prodiciastin, a sister of King Bimbisara, was one of his wives. One of his sisters was married to King Bimbisara, and Ajatashatru was her son. King Kaushal had a son named Vidudabha who revolted against him in his old age. The son's mother was the daughter of Mahanamada Shakya, who was related to the Buddha, and his grandmother was a slave girl. This fact the king did not know when he took her as one of his consorts. Hearing a derogatory remark made by Shakyas about his ignoble lineage, Vidudaba took vengeance by attempting to destroy the Shakyas. Unfortunately, it was due to Vidudaba that the king had to die a pathetic death in a hall outside the city with only a servant as his companion. King Kaushal preceded the Buddha. Majjhima Nikaya, number 89, number 90. So let's look after chapter 12 of the book, The Buddha's Ministry. Freed am I from all bonds, whether divine or human. You too, O bhikkhus, are freed from all bonds. Mahavacha, Mahavakka. The Buddha's beneficent and successful ministry lasted 45 years. From his 35th years, the year of his enlightenment, till his death in his 80th year. He served humanity both by example and by precept. Throughout the year, he wandered from place to place, at times alone, sometimes accompanied by his disciples, expounding the Dhamma to the people and liberating them from the bonds of samsara. During the rainy seasons, Vasana from July to November, owing to incessant rains, he lived in retirement as was customary with all ascetics in India in his time. In ancient times, as today, three regular seasons prevailed in India, namely Vasana, rainy, Hemanta, winter, and Gimhana, hot. It's Grishma. The Vasana rainy season starts in Ashla and extends up to Asya Yuga, that is approximately from the middle of July to the middle of November. During the Vasna period, due to torrential rains, rivers and streams usually get flooded. Roads get inundated. communications get interrupted, and people, as a rule, are confined to their homes and villages and live on what provisions they have collected during the previous seasons. During this time, the ascetics find it difficult to engage in their preaching tours, wandering from place to place. An infinite variety of vegetable and animal life also appears to such an extent that people could not move about without unconsciously destroying them. Accordingly, all ascetics, including the disciples of the Buddha, used to suspend their inherent activities and live in retirement in solitary places. As a rule, the Buddha and his disciples were invited to spend their rainy seasons either in a monastery or in a scheduled park. Sometimes, however, they used to retire to forest. During these rainy seasons, people flocked to the Buddha to hear the Dhamma and thus avail themselves of his presence in their vicinity to their best advantage. The first 20 years, first year at Banaras. After expounding the Dhammacakka Sutta to his first five disciples on the Ashla full moon day, he spent the first rainy seasons in the deer park at Ishipatna near Banaras. Here there was no special building where he could reside. Yasha's conversation took place during this retreat. Second, third, and fourth year at Rajgriha. Rajgriha was the capital of the kingdom of Magad, where ruled King Bimbisara. Where the Buddha visited the king in accordance with a promise made by him before his enlightenment. He offered him bamboo grove, Velluvana, to the Buddha and his disciples. This was an ideal solitary place for monks as it was neither too far nor too near to the city. 3 rainy seasons were spent by the Buddha in that quiet grove, and fifth year at Vaishali. During this year, while he was residing in the pinnacle hall at Mahavana near Vaishali, he heard of the impending death of King Sudodhana and repairing to his death chamber, preached the Dhamma to him. Immediately the king attained arhatship. For 7 days thereafter, he experienced the bliss of emancipation and passed away. It was in this year that the Bhikshuni order was founded at the request of Mahaprajapati Gautam. After the cerimation of the king, when the Buddha was temporarily residing at Nigoro Dharma, Mahaprajapati Gautami approached the Buddha and begged permission for women to enter the order. But the Buddha refused to return to the pinnacle hall at Rajgriha. Mahaprajapati Gautami was so intent on renouncing the world that she, accompanied by many Shakya and Kolya ladies, walked all the way from Kapilavastu to Rajgriha and through the intervention of Venerable Ananda, succeeded in entering the order. Sixth year at Mankula Hill in Koshambi, near Allahabad. Just as he performed the twin wonder, Yamaka Patiharya, to overcome the pride of his relatives at Kapilavastu, even so did he perform it for the second time at Mankula Hill to convert his alien followers. Seventh year at Tavatimsa Haven. A few days after the birth of Prince Siddhartha, Queen Mahamaya died and was born as a Deva, god, in the Tushita Haven. In this 7th year, during the 3 rainy months, the Buddha preached the Abhidhamma to the Devas of the Tavatimsa heaven, where the Mother Deva appeared to her, hear him. Delhi he came to earth and gave a summary of his sermon to the Venerable Sariputta, who in turn expounded the same doctrine in detail to his disciples. What is embodied in the present Abhidhamma Pitaka is supposed to be this detailed exposition of the Dhammavaihe. See chapter 9, see page 113. Abhidhamma is the highest doctrine which deals with Buddhist philosophy. See chapter 15. It is stated that on hearing these discourses, the Deva, who was his mother, attained the first stage of sainthood. Eighth year at Bheshakala forest near Sumara rock in the Bagga district. Ninth year at Kaushambi. It was in this year that Magandia harbored a grieves against the Buddha and sought an opportunity to dishonor him. Magandia was a beautiful maiden. Her parents would not give her in marriage as the prospective suitors, in their opinion, were not worthy of their daughter. One day, as the Buddha was surveying the world, he perceived the spiritual development of the parents. Out of compassion for them, he visited the place where the father of the girl was tending the sacred fire. The Brahmin, fascinated by his physical beauty, and thought that he was the best person to whom he could give his daughter in marriage, and requesting him to stay there until his arrival, hurried home to bring his daughter. The Buddha, in the meantime, stamped his footprints on that spot and moved to a different place. The Brahmin and his wife, accompanied by their daughter, who was dressed in her best garments, came to that spot and observed the footprint. The wife, who was conversant with science, said that it was not the footprint of an ordinary man, but of a pure person who had eradicated all passion. The Brahmin ridiculed the idea, and noticing the Buddha at a distance, offered his daughter unto him. The Buddha described how he overcame his passions, said, having seen Tanha, Arti, and Raga, I had no pleasure for the pleasures of love. The three daughters of Mara. What is this body filled with urine and dung? I should not be willing to touch it even with my foot. Hearing his Dhamma, the Brahmin and his wife attained Anagami, the third stage of sainthood, but proud Magandia felt insulted and she thought to herself, if this man has no need of me, it is perfectly proper for him to say so, but he declares me to be full of urine and dung. Very well, by virtue of birth, lineage, social position, wealth, and the charm of youth that I possess, I shall obtain a husband who is my equal, and then I shall know what ought to be done to the monk Gautama. Enraged by the words of the Buddha, she conceived a hatred toward him. Later, she was given as a consort to the king of Udena. Taking advantage of her position as one of the royal consorts, she bribed people and instigated them to rebel and drive the Buddha out of the city. When the Buddha entered the city, they shouted at him, saying, you are a thief, a simpleton, a fool, a camel, an ox, an ass, a denizen of hell, a beast. You have no hope of salvation. A state of punishment is all that you can look forward to. Venerable Ananda, unable to hear this flighty abuse, approached the Buddha and said, Lord, these citizens are rebelling and abusing us. Let us go elsewhere. Where shall we go, Ananda? Asked the Buddha. to some other city, Lord, said Ananda. If men reveal us there, shall we go then? Inquired the Buddha. To still another city, Lord, said Ananda. Ananda, one should not speak thus. Where a difficulty arises, right there should it be settled. The Buddhist Legends, Part 1, page 274, would be referred for further understanding. Only under those circumstances is it permissible to go elsewhere. But who are revealing you, Ananda? Questioned the Buddha. Lord, everyone is revealing us, slaves and all, replied Ananda. Admonishing Venerable Ananda to practice patience, the Buddha said. Number one, as an elephant in the battlefield withstands the arrows shot from above, even so will I endure abuse. Verily, much people are undisciplined. Number two, they lead the trained horse or elephants to an assembly. The king mounts the trained animal. The best among men are the disciplined who endure abuse. And number three, excellent are trained mules. So are through bred horses or Sindh and noble tusked elephants, but the man who is disciplined surpasses them all. Again he addressed Venerable Ananda and said, be not disturbed. These men will reveal you only for 7 days, and on the eighth day they will become silent. A difficulty encountered by the Buddhas last no longer than 7 days. 10th Yarot, Parilayaka forest. While the Buddha was residing at Kaushambi, a dispute arose between two parties of bhikkhus, one versed in the Dhamma, the other in the Vinaya, with respect to the transgression of a minor rule of etiquette in the lavatory. Their respective supporters also were divided into two sections. Even the Buddha could not settle the differences of these quarrelsome monks. They were vehement and would not listen to his advice. The Buddha thought, under present conditions, the jostling crowd in which I live makes my life out of discomfort. Dhammapada, Volume 320, 321, 322. See Buddhist Legends, Volume 1, page 176. Moreover, these monks pay no attention to what I say. Suppose I were to retire from the haunts of men and live a life of solitude. In pursuance of this thought, without even informing the Sangha, alone he retired to the Parilayaka forest and spent the rainy season at the foot of a beautiful sal tree. It was on this occasion, according to the story, that an elephant and a monkey ministered to his needs. 11th year at Ekanala Brahmin village. The following Koshi Bhadavaja Sutta was delivered there here. On one occasion, the Buddha was residing at Ekanalin, Dakhinagari, the Brahmin village in Magad. At that time, about 500 plugs belonging to Koshi Bhadavaja Brahmin were harnessed for the shopping. Thereupon the exalted one in the forenoon dressed himself and taking bowel and robe went to the working place of the Brahmin. At that time, the distribution of food by the Brahmin was taking place. The Buddha went to the place where food was being distributed and stood aside. The Brahmin Koshi Bharadvaja saw the Buddha waiting for alms. Seeing him, he spoke thus: I, O ascetic, plugged and saw, and having plugged and shone, I ate. You also, O ascetic, should plug and saw, and having plugged and shone, you should eat. I too, a Brahmin, plug and shone. Having plugged and shone, I it, said the Buddha. But we see not the Venerable Gautama's yoke or plug share or goat or oxen, albeit the Venerable Gautama said, I too plug and shone. Having plugged and shone, I eat, remarked the Brahmin. Dhammapada ko Shambhakavattu Suttanipata, page 12. Then the Brahmin Bharadvaja addressed the exalted one thus: a farmer you claim to be, but we see none of your tillage. Being questioned about plugging, please answer us so that we may know your plugging. The Buddha answered, confidence, sadha, is the seed. Discipline, tapo, is the rain. Wisdom, panna, my yoke and plug. Modesty, hiri, the pole of my plug. Mind, mano, the rain, and mindfulness, sati, my plug, share, and goal. I am controlled in body, controlled in speech, temperate in food. With truthfulness, I cut away weeds. Absorption in the highest, arhanship is the release of the oxen. Perseverance, virya, is my beast of burden that carries me towards the born-free state, nirvana. Nirvana. Without turning, it goes, and having gone, it does not grieve. Thus is the telling dawn. It bears the fruit of deathlessness. Having done this tilling, one is freed from all sorrow. Thereupon the Brahmin Koshi Bharadvaja, filling a large bronze bowl with milk rice, offered it to the exalted one, saying, may the Venerable Gautama eat the milk rice. The Venerable Gautama is a farmer. Since the Venerable Gautama tills a crop that bears the fruit of deathlessness. The exalted one, however, refused to accept this, saying, what is obtained by reciting verses is not fit to be eaten by me. This, O Brahmin, is not the rule of seers. The enlightened rejoice, reject such food. While the principles last, there is the livelihood. Serve the unique, cankerless, great sage of holy calm with other kind of food and drink, for he is like a field to him that desires to show good deeds. 12th year at Veranja. A Brahmin of Veranja, hearing that the Buddha was residing at Veranja near Nellaruj Nimba tree with a large company of his disciples, approached him and raised several questions with regard to his conduct. The Brahmin was so pleased with the answers that he became a follower of the Buddha and invited him and his disciples to spend the rainy season at Viranja. But Buddha signified his assent as usual by his silence. Unfortunately, at this particular time, there was a famine at Viranja, and the Buddha and his disciples were compelled to live on food intended for horses. A horse dealer was very kindly provided them with coarse food available, and the Buddha partook of such food with perfect equanimity. One day during this period, Venerable Sariputta, arising from his solitary meditation, approached the Buddha and respectfully questioned him thus: which Buddha's dispensation endured long and which did not? The Buddha replied that the dispensations of Buddha's Vipasik, Shikhi, and Vaisabhu did not endure long, while the dispensations of the Buddha's Sandha, Nagamana, and Kashyapa endured long. The Buddha attributed this to the fact that some Buddhas did make no great effort in preaching the Dhamma in detail and promulgated no rules and regulations for the disciplines and disciples of the disciples, while other Buddhas did so. Thereupon, Venerable Sariputta respectfully implored the Buddha to promulgate the fundamental precepts, Patimoksha, for the future discipline of Sangha, so that the holy life may endure long. Be patient, Sariputta, be patient, said the Buddha and added. The reference footnotes tells about Vinaya Pittika, Sutta Vidavanga, Prajivika, page 111, Miss Ivy on Book of the Disciplines, part 1, page 123. Could we read? And be patient, Sariputta, be patient, said the Buddha and added. The Tathagata alone is aware of the time for it until certain defiling conditions arise in the Sangha that the Tathagata does not promulgate means of discipline for the disciples and does not lay down the fundamental precepts Vati Moksha. When such defiling conditions arise in the Sangha, then only the Tathagata promulgates means of discipline and lays down the fundamental precepts for the disciples in order to eradicate such defilements. When Sariputta, the Sangha attains long standing, Arattanumahattam, full development, Vepulamahattam, great increase in gains, Labhagamahattam, and greatness in erudition, Bahusuttamahattam, defiling conditions arise in the Sangha. Then does the Tathagata promulgate means of discipline and the fundamental precepts to prevent such defilements. Sariputta, the order of disciples, is free from troubles, devoid of evil tendencies, free from stain, pure and well established in virtue. The last of my 500 disciples is a Sotapanna, stream winner, not liable to fall, steadfast, and destined for enlightenment. The rainy season at Varanja forms the subject of the introduction to the Parajika book of the Vinayapitaka. At the end of this rainy season, the Buddha went on preaching through to Surya, Samksha, Kanakaja, Paryaga, and then crossing the river, stayed some time in Banaras and returned there thence to Vaishali to reside at the Pinnacle Hall in Mahavana. 13th year was spent at Kalia Rock. 14th year at Jetavana Monastery, Savatya. The Venerable Rahul received his higher ordination at this time on the completion of his 20th year. The Buddha was referring to Venerable Ananda. 15th year at Kapilavastu. The pathetic death of King Supabuddha, who was angry with the Buddha for leaving his daughter, Princess Yashodhara, occurred in this year. It may be mentioned that the Buddha spent only one rainy season in his birthplace. 16th year at the city of Alavi. The conversation of Alavaka, the demon who feasted on human flesh, took place in this year. Alavaka, a ferocious demon, was enraged to see the Buddha in his mansion. He came up to him and asked him to depart. Very well, friend, said the Buddha and went out. Come in, said he. The Buddha came in. For the second and third time he made the same request and the Buddha obeyed. But when he commended him for the fourth time, the Buddha refused and asked him to do what he could. Well, I'll ask you a question, said Alavaka. If you will not answer, I will scatter your thoughts or read your heart or take you by your feet and fling you across the Gangas. Nay, friend, replied the Buddha, I see not in this world inclusive of gods, Brahmas, ascetics and Brahmins. Amongst the multitude of gods and men, any who could scatter my thoughts or rive my heart or take me by my feet and filling me across the Gangas. However, friend, ask what you wish. Alavaka then asked the following questions. Herein, which is man's best possession? which well practiced yields happiness, which indeed is the sweetest of taste. How live do they call the best life? To these questions, the Buddha answered thus Sutta Nipata Alavaka Sutta, page 31, Chalmers, Teachings of the Buddha, page 45. Wherein confidence is man's best possession, Dhamma well practiced yields happiness. Truth indeed is the sweetest of tasks. Life lived with understanding is best, they say. Alavaka next asked the Buddha, how does one cross the flood? How does one cross the sea? How does one overcome sorrow? How is one purified? The exalted one replied, by confidence one crossed the flood, by heedfulness the sea, by effort one overcomes sorrow, by wisdom is one purified. Alavaka then inquired, how is wisdom gained? How are riches found? How is renown gained? How are friends found? Passing from this world to the next, how does one not grieve? In answer, the Buddha said, the heedful, intelligent person of confidence gains wisdom by hearing the Dhamma of the pure ones that leads to Nirvana. He who does what is proper, receiving and strenuous, gains wealth. By truth one attains to fame. Generosity binds friends. That faithful householder who possesses these four virtues truthfulness, good morals, courage, and liberality grieves not after passing away. Well, ask many other ascetics and Brahmins whether there is found anything greater than truthfulness, self control, generosity, and patience. Understanding well the meaning of the Buddha's words, see Kinder saying part 1, page 276 to 77. Understanding well the meaning of the Buddha's words, Alavaka said, how could I now ask diverse ascetics and Brahmins? Today I know what is the secret of my future welfare. For my own good did the Buddha came to allow it. Today I know where gifts bestowed yield fruit in abundance. From village to village, from town to town, will I wander, honoring the fully enlightened one and the perfection of the sublime Dhamma. 17th year was spent at Rajgriha, 18th year was spent at Kalika Rocks, 19th and 20th year were spent at Rajgriha. Then Buddha and Angulimala. It was in the 20th year that the Buddha converted the notorious murderer Angulimala. Ahimsaka, innocent was his original name. His father was chaplain to the king of Kosala. He received his education at Takshila, the famous educational center in the olden days, and became the most illustrious and favorite pupil of his renowned teacher. Unfortunately, his colleagues grew jealous of him, concocted a false story, and succeeded in poisoning the teacher's mind against him. The enraged teacher, without any investigation, contrived to put an end to his life by ordering him to fetch 1,000 human right hand fingers as teacher's honorarium. In obedience to the teacher, thou, thou with great reluctance, he repaired to the Jalini forest in Kosala and started killing people to collect fingers for the necessary offering. The fingers thus collected were hung on a tree, but as they were destroyed by crows and vultures, he later wore a garland of those fingers to ascertain the exact number. Psalms of the Brethren, pages 18 to 25, C. Angulimala Sutta, number 86, Majjhima Nikaya, volume 2, page 97. Hence, he was known by the name Angulimala, finger wrist, when he had collected 999 fingers. So the books state the Buddha appeared on the scene, overjoyed at the sight, because he thought that he could complete the required number by killing the great ascetic. He struck the Buddha drawing his sword. The Buddha, by his psychic power, created obstacles on the way so that Angulimala would not be able to get near him, although he walked at his usual pace. Angulimala ran as fast as he could, but he could not overtake the Buddha. Panting and sweating, he stopped and cried, "Stop, ascetic!" The Buddha calmly said, "Thou walk, yet I have stopped. You too." Angulimala stopped. The bandit thought these ascetics spear the truth, yet he says he had stopped, whereas it is I who have stopped. What does he mean? Standing, he questioned him. "Thou who art walking, friar, dost say, Lo, I have stopped, and me thou tellest who have stopped, I have not stopped. I ask thee, friar, what is the meaning of thy words? How sayest thou that thou hast stopped, but I have not?" The Buddha sweetly replied, "Yeah, I have stopped, Angulimala, evermore, towards all living things, renouncing violence. Thou holdest not thy hand against thy fellow man. Therefore, this I have stopped, but thou still goest on." Anglimala's good karma rushed up to the surface. He thought that the great Seri was none other but the Buddha Gautama, who, out of compassion, had came to help him. Straightway he threw away his armor and sword and became a convert. Later, as requested by him, he was admitted into the noble order by the Buddha with the mere utterance, "Come, O Bhikkhu, ehi bhikkhuni." Psalm of the Brethren, page 323-21. News spread that Angulimala had become a bhikshu. The king of Kaushal in particular was greatly relieved to hear of his conversion, because he was a veritable source of danger to his subjects. But Venerable Angulimala had no peace of mind, because even in his solitary meditation he used to recall memories of his past and the pathetic cries of his unfortunate victims. As a result of his evil karma, while seeking alms in the streets, he would become a target for stray stones and sticks, and he would return to the monastery with broken head and following blood, cut and crushes, to be reminded by the Buddha that he was merely repaying the effects of his own karma. One day, as he went on his round for alms, he saw a woman in travail. Moved by compassion, he reported this pathetic woman's suffering to the Buddha. He then advised him to pronounce the following words of truth, which later came to be known as the Angulimala Paritta. "Sister, since my birth in the Arya clan, for example, since his ordination, I knew not that I consciously destroyed the life of any living being. By this truth, may you be whole, and may your child be whole." He studied this Paritta, and going to the presence of the suffering sister, sat on a seat separated from her by a screen and uttered these words. Instantly she was delivered of the child with ease. The efficacy of this Paritta persists to this day. In due course, Venerable Angulimala attained arhatship. यतोऽहं भगिनी अरियय्य जातीय जातो न अभिजानामि संचिक्क पन्नजीवित वरोपिता Tenna Sachenna Sathe Tohodu Sote Gabha Sathati, protective discourse, referring to his memorable conversation by the Buddha. He says, some creatures are subdued by force, some by the hook, and some by whips. But I by such a one was tame, who needed neither staff nor sword. The Buddha spent the remaining 25 years of his life mostly in Savatthi at the Jatavana monastery, built by Anathapindika, the millennial, and partially at Babarama, built by Vishakha, the chief benefactress. Shalom of the Brethren, page 328, and this manner the chapter concludes. So let's move on to the next chapter 13. As what were the Buddha's daily routine? The Lord is awakened. He teaches Dhamma for awakening. Majjhima Nikaya. The Buddha can be considered that most energetic and the most active of all religious teachers that ever lived on earth. The whole day he was occupied with his religious activities except when he was attending to his physical needs. He was methodical and systematic in the performance of his daily duties. His inner life was one of meditation and was concerned with the experiencing of nirvanic bliss, while his outer life was one of selfless service for the moral upliftment of the world. Himself enlightened, he endeavored his best to enlighten others and liberate them from the ills of life. His day was divided into five parts, namely, number one, the forenoon season, number two, the afternoon season, number three, the first watch, number four, the middle watch, and number five, the last watch. The forenoon seasons. Usually, early in the morning, he surveys the world with his divine eye to see whom he could help if any person needs his spiritual assistance. Uninvited, he goes, often on foot, sometimes by air using his psychic powers, and converts that person to the right path. As a rule, he goes in search of the vicious and the impure, but the pure and the virtuous came in search of him. For instance, the Buddha went of his own accord to convert the robber and murderer Angulimala and the wicked demon Alavaka, but the pious young Vishaka, generous millennial Anathapindika, and intellectual Sariputta and Mogalanna came up to him for spiritual guidance. While rendering such a spiritual service to whomsoever it is necessary, if he is not invited to partake of alms by a lay supporter at some particular place, he before whom kings prostrated themselves would go in quest of alms through alleys and streets with bowel in hand, either alone or with his disciples. Standing silently at the door of each house without uttering a word, he collects whatever food is offered and placed in the bowl and returns to the monastery. Even in his 18th year, when he was old and in indifferent health, he went on his rounds for alms and Vaishali. Before midday, he finishes his meals. Immediately after lunch, he daily delivered a short discourse to the people, established them in the three refuse and the five precepts, and if any person is spiritually advanced, he is shown the path to sainthood. At times, he grants ordination to them if they seek admissions to the order and then retires to his chamber. The afternoon season. After the noon meal, he takes a seat in the monastery, and the bhikkhus assemble to listen to his exposition of the Dhamma. Some approach him to receive suitable objects of meditation according to their temperaments, Others pay their due respect to him and retire to their cells to spend the afternoon. After his discourse or exhortation to his disciples, he himself retires to his private perfumed chamber to rest. If he so desires, he lies on his right side and asleep for a while with mindfulness. On rising, he attains to the ecstasy of great compassion, Maha Karuna Samapati, and service with a divine eye. The world, especially the bhikkhus, who retired to solitude for meditation, and other disciples in order to give them any spiritual advice that is needed. If the erring ones who need advice happen to be at a distance, there he goes by psychic powers, admonishes them, and retires to his chamber. Towards evening, the lay followers flock to him to hear the Dhamma, perceiving their innate tendencies and their temperaments with the Buddha eye. He preaches to them for about 1 hour. Each member of the audience, without differently constituted, thinks that the Buddha's sermon is directed in particular to him. Such was the Buddha's method of expounding the Dhamma. As a rule, the Buddha converts others by explaining his teachings with homely illustrations and parables, for he appeals more to the intellect than to emotions. To the average man, the Buddha at first speaks of generosity, discipline, and heavenly bliss. To the more advanced, he speaks on the evils of material pleasures and on the blessings of renunciation. To the highly advanced, he expounds the Four Noble Truths. On rare occasions, as in the case of Angulimal and Khema, did the Buddha resort to his psychic powers to effect a change of heart in his listeners. The sublime teachings of the Buddha appeal to both the masses and the intelligentsia alike, a Buddhist poet sings, giving joy to the wise, promoting the intelligence of the middling, and dispelling the darkness of the dull-witted. This speech is for all people. Buddha Chaku constitutes the knowledge of the one's inclinations, asya, and the innate tendencies, asya, nuksya, nana, and the knowledge of the dullness and keenness of faculties such as confidence, mindfulness, concentration, energy, and wisdom. Indriya Paropariyatannam. Both the rich and the poor, the high and the low, renounced their former faiths and embraced the new message of peace. The infant Sasana, which was inaugurated with a nucleus of five ascetics, soon developed into a million and peacefully spread throughout central India. The first watch. This period of the night extends from 6 to 10 pm and was exclusively reserved for instructions to bhikshus. During this time, the bhikshus were free to approach the Buddha and get their doubts clear, question him on the intricacies of the Dhamma, obtain suitable objects of meditation, and hear the doctrine. The middle watch. During this period, which extends from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., celestial beings such as Devas and Brahmas, who are invisible to the physical eye, approach the Buddha to question him on the Dhamma. And after recurring passage in the suttas is now when the night was far spent, a certain Deva of surpassing splendor came to the Buddha, respectfully saluted him, and stood at the side. Several discourses and answers given to their queries appears in the Samayutta Nikaya, the last watch. The small hours of the morning, extending from 2 to 6 a.m., which comprise the last watch, are divided into four parts. The first part is spent in pacing up and down, Kankamana, Sattapacha Sattaka, volume 78, The Dispensations of the Buddha. This serves as a mild physical exercise to him. During the second part, that is from 3 to 4 am, he mindfully sleeps on his right side. During the third part, that is from 4 to 5 am, he attains the state of arhanship and experiences nibbanic bliss. For one full hour from 5 to 6 am, he attains the ecstasy of great compassion, Maha Karuna Samapatti, and radiates thoughts of loving kindness towards all beings and soften their hearts. At this early hour, he surveys the whole world with his Buddha eye to see whether he could be of service to any. The virtuous and those that need his help appear vividly before him, though they may live at a remote distance. Out of compassion for them, he goes of his own accord and renders necessary spiritual assistance. The whole day he is fully occupied with his religious duties, unlike any other living being. He sleeps only for 1 hour at night, for 2 full hours in the morning, and at dawn he pervades the whole world with thoughts of boundless love and brings happiness to millions, leading a life of voluntary poverty, seeking his alms with inconveniencing any, wandering from place to place for 8 months throughout the year, preaching his sublime Dhamma. He tirelessly worked for the good and happiness of all till his 80th year. According to the Dharma Padipika of the last watch is divided into these four parts. According to the commentaries, the last watch consists of three parts. During the third part, the Buddha attains the ecstasy of great compassion. Then we will read about this. So things happens as we observe the things. नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय हरिः ॐ नमो दिव्य महादिव्य शिवाय सत्यं नमो नमो प्रकृते भद्राय नियतः कुन्तः स्मृतम् ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयां सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कष्टं दुःखभागमपेतम् ॐ सहनां भवतु सहनौ पुनक्तं सह वीर्यं कर्वावहं तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ओम शांति 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 हरि